Hey everyone, and welcome to another episode of Binkhorsts and Blockbusters. I'm Kate,
And I'm Garrett.
and this is a podcast where we talk about media, film, and TV. And tonight we're reviewing one of my favorite horror movies from the 2000s, The Ring.
Yeah, I've only heard about this in its mythology. I'd never seen it before, so this was an interesting watch.
Yeah, and you give it a thumbs up?
I would give it a thumbs up.
Cool. But first, what's on TV?
So there's a new TV show from the John Wick universe. It's streaming on Peacock now. It's called The Continental. Um,
Cool.
it's pretty good. I've only seen the first episode now. There are going to be three in total, and I think each one is going to be about an hour long. Um, it's a prequel to the John Wick films. It's just kind of set in the same universe, and there hasn't been a lot of like connection. The main character is Winston, who runs the Continental in the later versions, played by Al Swearingen. Um, it has a lot. Hmm?
Is Al there?
Yeah. Well, no, not yet. I imagine there's going to be some like flash forwarding at some point. But he's not playing.
It's him as
It's,
like a young man.
yeah, it's him in his 20s.
Oh.
They didn't digitally de-age him 50 years.
I mean, part of me is disappointed by that. Part of me is like, well, that was probably a good decision.
Um, Honestly, I think it would have been funny if they just put him in there.
Yeah,
Um,
he doesn't age. It's
yeah.
fine. He's always been that age.
Uh, Mel Gibson's in it too, which is weird to see his face and stuff again, but I
Yeah,
guess I
wow.
guess he's been uncanceled.
I was gonna say, wasn't he canceled for
He
a
was
good reason?
he was.
Uh,
Um, it has some really great action scenes. I've really enjoyed some of that. It has a lot of the same talent behind it, a lot of the same creative team. So, all that is going to be at the same level. Um, they're going hard on the mythos
oh
of
yeah.
like there just exists all of these thieves and like this organization. In the first episode they're like this predates the Roman Empire, and I was just like they're just taking this to extremes to be funny
Wow.
now.
Yeah, so I mean, it's almost like an Assassin's Creed level of like historic intertwining.
Yeah, it's crazy. But it's fun, it's goofy. uh I'm enjoying it. I'm excited to keep watching it.
Cool. Well, I will check it out. This does sound promising. I love the John Wick movies and I've really enjoyed the mythos that's in them. Though I do also like the not knowing, because I think that makes those movies a little better. So I'll be interested to see it and I am looking forward to it. I needed some new stuff to watch and this sounds like a winner.
Yeah, I mean it starts off pretty badass with a little heist and some excellent
Ooh.
choreographed fight scenes.
Cool. Well, we like that.
Uh, Good news, everyone. There are some strike updates.
Yay.
So just this past weekend on September 27th, the Writers Guild union leadership voted to end the strike. It lasted almost 150 days. Crazy length of time.
Yeah, that's a long strike, and that's a lot of time to for a lot of people to be without an income, without benefits, without health insurance. There's going to be a lot of booking of appointments in the next few days for those folks that get their benefits back as soon as the strike's over. So, yay,
Yeah,
labor.
yeah. And going back to 2007, 2008 strike, that was only 100 days. And that was estimated to cost Los Angeles, anywhere between $1 and $2 billion. So who knows how bad this one turned out? That'll be interesting to learn in a couple years when numbers get in.
Yeah, yeah, and Other labor stuff is going on in the country. Be aware of your local laborers or labor trials, unions. Be aware. Think about it. Support your unions so that the workers can get what they deserve.
Yeah, right now there's the automotive strike going on, and our current president, Joe Biden, he's down there with the strikers. Pretty badass.
Yeah, I have some issues with that, but uh, I will save my extreme political opinions for another day.
If anything, it gets more news and press coverage, which is, really what I think a lot of people wanted. In the Writers and Actors Guild strikes, them having, the media just focused on it for so long, I think really benefited them. We got
Yeah.
to hear a lot of, good stories. Um, I
Yeah,
don't, yeah, I don't think it's a bad thing.
well, you know. I also think that it's good to have some visible strikes outside of manufacturing because, I mean I work in an administrative union or administrative area where there are no unions, so it's nice to see some non-standard unions be in the news like this and be disruptive, truly.
Oh
Uh,
yeah,
because the automotive industry, the margins aren't nearly as high as they are with film and TV, and I think that's one of the things that you have to consider when striking is how much do uh, your supervisors and management have to lose by you striking, and it turns out it is bigger in certain areas than others.
yeah. So let's talk a little bit about what the Writers Guild was able to get out of this negotiation. Over the next 3 years, they're going to have a 12.5% pay increase, which is pretty good. 5% is going to be started when they return to work. So that'll be a big bump initially. They're going to get increased residuals from Netflix streaming, at least. I imagine with the other streaming services, they will as well. Um, they're also going to get viewership-based streaming bonuses, which can range from $9,000 to $40,000, and these will be on budgets of or on shows with budgets of more than $30 million, which, as we talked about with like the Disney shows, those are all $100 million operations. So every one of those, the writers on it will probably get paid if they're being watched.
Yeah. Well, and I think that's positive because it encourages good writing in these high budget TV shows that, maybe to discourage another Game of Thrones situation or um other such. Heck, The Witcher, I think is a
Yeah,
great of
yeah,
the writing just going to shit, and this kind of a bonus incentive will at least encourage the writers to do a really good job to try and get those views. And we like that because we like good media.
yes, very much so. The producers of these productions will now have to share watch hours of streaming content with the Writers Guild, which is something that they previously hidden. And in what I read, it was kind of implied that that would stay within the industry, but I imagine that'll be the first chance we get to actually see something honest. Um, I know we've brought it up at least with Ahsoka and probably a couple other things, the amount of time people spend watching these shows. And often I think they're only reporting it if it's really good. Um, and they might be inflating it. That's just my opinion.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, that's certainly possible. I mean, I wish I had access to those numbers just for myself because, I watch Archer to fall asleep at night, which
Mhm.
is weird. But a lot of people fall asleep to different things. So, Futurama was a big one for a lot of people for a while.
Yeah, and The
I would be,
Office, things like that.
yeah, yeah. I would be really interested to find out how many hours of my life I've spent watching Archer. I tried to calculate it once when I was in grad school, and I'd only been watching Archer for about a year, maybe a year and a half, and yeah, it was a little disturbing, but I'm also proud of it. So there's that.
They've also made some considerations towards artificial intelligence. Um, it cannot be used as source material. It cannot be required to be used by the writers. However, the writers can use it if they choose to, and AI material must be disclosed to them. Uh, I think there should just be a blanket ban on it, but that's me, and I work in computer science, so
Yeah, I mean there are pros and cons to that. Like I have a friend who gets a lot of his like ideas for his D&D campaigns through an AI and, uses AI generation to like create fun images to like think about for like worlds and it can be a really great way to like spin the creative gears, but it is such a slippery slope when it comes to attribution and authentication and those kinds of things. I mean, plagiarism is going to be an issue with this no matter what.
yeah, it's certainly a developing uh, state of, what is allowed, what's not allowed. The ethics surrounding it are very much up for debate.
Yeah. Well, and I do think that, it's going to be pretty impossible to ban it outright. I mean, people are going to go home and use it, you know. Yeah, so that's that and we'll see how that develops. We'll see how our opinions change about that over time. I'm not entirely sure how I feel about it completely. There's no bright line rule for me on this.
Uh, yeah, it's hard. Um,
I like bright line rules, so
okay. So the actors, they're still striking. They still want to get a better deal, and their strikes are potentially going to go into another industry, one that I'm also familiar with. They're going to, or they've voted, they're talking about it. I don't think there's been 100% consensus on it, but they're potentially going to strike in the video game industry. So there have been a lot of video games in the past few years that have utilized actors, specifically their likenesses, and then always as voice actors and things. Um, there was some controversy over the last Bayonetta game over the voice actress there not getting anywhere near what they ought to deserve from being the lead voice in anything. So hopefully in that industry as well, they get a better deal.
yeah, yeah. I hope that they can do that. I hope that more video game unions kind of take their rights more seriously and move the barometer up a bit for their own labor, but we will see.
Yeah, the video game industry is not short on controversies.
Indeed. I mean, I've played enough Bethesda games to throw up my hands and go, what the hell's going on with you people?
So let's move into our feature presentation.
The Ring! Yeah, so
Uh,
the movie came out in 2002 when I was 11 years old, and I did not see it in theaters. And this is important because I saw it on VHS.
Whoa, just like in the movie.
Yeah, and VHS, back then, it was still a big thing. I mean, we were slowly transitioning to DVDs.
Yeah, I would have been 5 at this point. Even as a kid, I remember the VHS. Uh, that hung around for I think a bit longer than people like to remember because the switch in between DVDs to Blu-rays was pretty instant.
Yeah, and I think for especially for kids, like the Disney movies, the Nickelodeon stuff, it was always on VHS tapes. So like, it's totally reasonable for you to have been watching, Disney VHSs long after, most other things switched to DVDs. But I remember Lord of the Rings 1 and Pirates of the Caribbean 1, I both had on VHS for sure, along with Titanic, of course. But, so, this is right at the cusp of, switching over. Because the other two Lord of the Rings I had on DVDs. So, but Lord of the Rings 1 was VHS. So that's how I know that's when the switch was, right around this time.
I know I had the first three Harry Potter movies on VHS because I taped the boxes together.
Yeah. Oh, this is totally that's bizarre. Okay, I just realized what you said. I am
What?
baffled by that and confused.
That way
Um,
they were all together. You put them on a shelf and they're,
well, couldn't they just sit next to each other?
well, sure, but then it could get separated.
Gosh. But anyway, speaking of Harry Potter, and I meant to bring this up before we started recording so we could put in a slide, but we have our first in memoriam today.
Oh, yes, we do.
So, maybe we'll I don't know what we're gonna do because this is one of those like breaking news things where Caitlin's mind is broken and
I'll put a slide in.
yeah, we're gonna edit in a slide because Michael Gambon, who did play Dumbledore in Harry Potter, but is known for many, many other great films, many other acting opportunities, and most importantly, for nearly flipping his car over on Top Gear in the Gambon Curve, which was named after him.
Yes.
He has passed away. Um, and we are very sad about this. He is one of my favorite Top Gear guests for sure.
That's his legacy.
I mean,
It's part of it. It's part of it.
so it's funny, like he did not like to be interviewed, and he didn't go on a lot of interview shows, but Top Gear, he loved cars, so he was on Top Gear, and yeah, so he passed away at the age of 82. And I mean, he's known for a lot of things. Like he is in the background of so many movies. Gosford Park, The Kingsman, um, and he plays, the voice in many animated films in addition to Harry Potter. So, I mean, he's in Layer Cake, which is a movie that we will review, I'm sure, at some point on this channel. Definitely one of those like actors that gives you the warm fuzzy feeling inside.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So, sorry for that break in the normal scheduled program. Back to the ring.
So The Ring is a 2002 film directed by Gore Verbinski. Now he's made several movies that we've watched. Another that I know was on VHS because we had it was Mouse Hunt.
Yes. Loved Mouse Hunt.
Yes, I remember really enjoying that. It's there's a mouse in a house that these two guys are trying to repair, and it causes them all sorts of havoc. Christopher Walken plays a mouse exterminator, and I think the mouse ends up killing him.
Yeah, yeah, that's a good moment in television or film there. I forgot about that completely. Oh, I wonder how much of my like wants to buy a house relate to that movie. Like I want to buy and renovate an old Victorian mansion just like that.
I think that and then Homes on Homes is what makes me want to do hyper masculine house renovations.
Yes. Yeah, I we need some good woodwork in our lives. Also we need to win the lottery. For sure, in order to make those dreams a reality. And in Mouse Hunt, there was some kind of contrived reason that they bought the house too, right?
It was inherited from their dad who owned the string
Mhm.
factory.
String factory. Yeah, because the mouse had the string. Anyway, this is nonsense. And what other movies has Gore Verbinski written?
I think that movie was based on there was a strike going on at the string factory and they had to sell the house to get money to pay the workers. I think that was the plot. I'm
Oh,
I'm bringing it full circle to the strike.
I just remember the lady's crazy hair.
I do remember this.
Right. Yeah.
Um, he
We've completely lost all of our viewers, Garrett.
uh, look, if they can't stick around for the tangent on the mouse adventure, they don't deserve to be here.
Verbinski, what else has he done?
So shortly after making this, he was hired on to make the to direct the Pirates of the Caribbean: Curse of the Black Pearl, and then he went on
What?
to yeah, and then he went on to do the next two movies in that series. So the good
That's
ones.
crazy. That really is crazy. Like this guy, the guy who did The Ring, did Mousetrap and Pirates of the Caribbean.
Yes. Now it gets crazier. The famous score in Pirates of the Caribbean,
Right.
the I believe that's all done by Hans Zimmer, who we worked with on this movie. Hans Zimmer also did the work here.
Whoa.
Yeah, it's just really weird connections all around.
Well, I have a complaint about that because the famous music from Pirates of the Caribbean is the same music from Gladiator. So yeah, they just copied it.
Okay,
I mean, they
well,
were both Hans Zimmer. He copied himself. It's disappointing to watch Gladiator and hear the Pirates of the Caribbean music and go, shit, that's a Pirates of the Caribbean music.
I guess I haven't noticed that before, but
Oh,
I
you'll never not notice it again, and I'm sorry.
right. So this film stars Naomi Watts, who's a personal favorite of mine for her role in David Lynch's Mulholland Drive. Uh, it also stars Martin Henderson and Brian Cox. I think Naomi Watts gives a really great performance in this film. She hits it out of the park again.
Yeah, yeah, she does a great job, and she doesn't play a helpless female, or a manic pixie dream girl, or any of the other female archetypes that we don't like. And that's great.
Yeah. So this film has an interesting legacy behind it. So it's based off of a Japanese movie that came out in 1988 that was also called The Ring. Sometimes you'll find it online as Ringu. And this was based on a novel by Koji Suzuki in 1991. The novel, there's like a trilogy of them. There's also some video games. The original Japanese movie has several sequels. There's manga on it. This it's a huge series over in Japan. There's a lot of it. It's still being developed and worked on now. Um,
Yeah,
y-
that's kind of crazy to me that it's that wide and deep because in America, we got The Ring and we have The Ring 2, which also is a good film. If you haven't seen it, it's not The Ring, but I mean it's close. What year again was Ring You?
98.
Oh, okay. Okay. I thought you said 88 earlier and I got confused.
No.
Okay.
Um,
So about 4 years between the two.
yeah. So this film was one of the first American adaptations of a Japanese horror film, and then that spawned a bunch of them
It
later.
did.
The Grudge is probably the most famous other one.
Yeah, The Grudge is huge. And then I was thinking about it today. Dark Water, also big, and very good. And then there's another one with a photograph mechanism, a camera that's actually set in Japan, and I don't remember what that one's called, but these are all movies that I was watching in, middle school, and they're creepy. But they're not like gross and violent.
No, this movie isn't that gross or violent, really.
It's a
There,
little. There are gross moments, but they're easy enough to like look away from.
yeah. Um, so this movie did spawn some sequels. There's a direct sequel that was released, I think, in 2005. It was met with pretty negative reviews.
I liked it.
I think horror sequels are hard to do right. Um, Having not seen this one, only going off of what I know, I imagine like it would be hard to continue on this story.
Yeah.
Then there was a sequel to that in the late teens called Rings, and I know nothing about that one.
Yeah, I hadn't even heard of that. I'm a little suspicious. It's like the Blair Witch Project sequels that came out 10 years later. Not good.
Mhm. So most of this film was shot in Washington, which is great. I live out in Washington, and I recognize some of the places.
Yeah, I had never noticed what city it was in, and then I saw the name of the paper because Naomi Watts' character is a journalist and she works at the Seattle Times or something, Seattle Rising, I don't even know. Some newspaper in Seattle. And so how did this movie capture Seattle vibes?
I think pretty well. There's some good establishing shots. It's just about always raining. Um, her little child carries around an umbrella, which is not something you see here because we all have very expensive Columbia branded jackets that encompass us, like ponchos. Um, there was a bit of overrepresentation of the Seattle monorail, which is really only down one street, but they shot it several times to make it seem, I don't know, more there. It was just weird. Um,
Yeah, I don't remember that scene that at all, but
okay, well, I
might have gone
noticed
over
it.
my head. It's fine. I mean, you know, me and trains. I'm like train good, like train.
Yeah, they did a good job capturing like some of the grunginess, especially when she goes to her uh, ex's loft,
Hmm.
and having her live in that like big skyrise type thing and looking into everybody else's houses. Yeah, that's very much how it's oriented out here. Um,
Yeah, and then what kind of suburb, like, do you think was like the initial scenes open in a suburban house with some teenagers? Where do you think that would have been? What kind of suburb?
I think that could have been anywhere around here. There are a lot of houses kind of like that. It did look more colonial, which is something that like we very quickly replace. But it's possible that that was shot in a different location because they also filmed a little bit in Oregon as well.
Yeah.
Um, and a lot of the nature stuff and the ferry and things that was all shot in Washington.
Yeah, the island with the lighthouse and stuff like that. I mean, I remember from being out there with you that, that did, say to me very, very Seattle, very Washington, even the cabin, that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Vibes. Cool.
So that's our establishment of this film. So let's talk about what it's about, and let's start with a little bit of the mythology.
Yeah, so the premise is that you watch this VHS tape and then you get a phone call and the phone call tells you you're going to die in 7 days. And then in 7 days, you get another phone call and then you die.
Yeah, it's very simple, but I think anybody who's seen it would immediately recognize the phrase "you're gonna die in 7 days." That's more or less all I knew about the movie.
Yeah, yeah, it certainly has become a ubiquitous with the movie, and the advertising that came around with it too, and when we were at school, talking about the movie because only cool kids got to see the movie because it's scary, it's like, ooh, you're gonna die in 7 days, it was a thing culturally in the moment, it was a thing.
So the VHS tape in question that we watch, we see it a number of times throughout the film, and we get to watch the entirety of it as Naomi Watts is investigating the tape and the death of her niece and of other school children at the time who had gone and seen it. She tracks it down and finds it and watches it for herself because she doesn't really believe the myth yet.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, it's hard to believe that a bunch of teenagers died because they watched a VHS tape. I mean, that's not something that most people are going to believe. And she has a lot of skepticism with that. She's a journalist, so she's looking into investigative reporting and that kind of stuff. So she is down for trying to figure this out, especially if four teenagers who all knew each other and hung out die at the same time in separate places. That's suspicious on many levels.
Yeah, there has to be some connecting thread. And if it's not the video, then it's something else, and she wants to pull at that.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, the video is fantastic. I mean, as a, a teenager, I had never seen anything like this. And I think the Naomi Watts's boyfriend at some point in the movie says, "Oh, it's very like college art project or something." And, at that time in my life, I'd never been exposed to anything like this. So I just thought it was really cool. Like a lot of the shots, really speak to me. I mean, I love fire escapes and the shadows they create. So the ladder with the shadow on the side of the building, very cool. Centipedes freak me out more than anything.
I hate them.
Yeah, terrible. Ugh. And there's enough other images like the blood in the water and the maggots and the fingers and um other little images that are just like creepy and like ew. But this movie does a great job of showing you those things and then showing you them over and over in different ways. And it picks out these like four or five different elements to continually remind you of.
Yeah. Have you ever seen the film American Beauty?
Yes.
There's a scene in that where the two teenagers are just watching a film one of them made of the bag floating around in the breeze.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's I got those vibes from that.
Oh,
I
well,
well, because I instantly understood his comment of like, oh yeah, this looks like, just some like high school like or like college like project. Like it has that vibe, but if you've never seen anything like that before, it is weird, it is creepy. Um
yeah.
and
Well,
I think
and, the other thing is that if I was to see this film, particularly in an art gallery in one of the rooms, where they show you films, I would still think it was pretty cool, like on the grand scheme and I've been to MoMA, I'm an art history person, like I've seen lots of digital art, lots of movies, lots of short documentaries in art museums, and a lot of them are just garbage. Fully, fully support that a lot of that shit is garbage. But this, I still think I would think it was cool.
it does do a good job of being creepy,
Hmm.
which I think is something that, the videotape that kills you has to do. If it was, just something pretty mundane, I think that would be less horrifying. It wouldn't help the mythos at all. Nobody would take it seriously.
Yeah. Yeah, it is very interesting and I like it and I like how they use the imagery over and over through the film. I like all the weird stuff. I mean, it speaks to me on a maybe this is like my goth, person coming out, but I really like it. I always have.
So I think one of the big things about all horror media is if there are ghosts, if there are monsters, things like that, we want to find some kind of reason for why they are what they are. Um, for Michael Myers, that was, an abusive childhood turned him into like a monster and he went on a rampage. For Freddy Krueger, he was burned alive. For uh, um, what's another good mythos?
Well, like the exorcisms are like, they're various devil possessions. So,
Right, right. Or like, haunting films and having Vincent D'Onofrio tell you about like Gazool or Gazebo or something. The monsters haunting you. I feel like we're always looking for that in horror movies, even though, it doesn't make sense or it doesn't matter or it's silly. And this is one where we're presented with it, and then we go through with a character who like actually goes about a realistic way of unraveling the mystery and getting to the bottom of it. And you have a lot of hope, you have a lot of personal like stake and interest, and it's still able to have some twists and turns that you don't expect. And it's not, I don't know, you don't feel cheated getting to the bottom of what's happening.
Right, yeah. Yeah, it's a mystery that has a lot of depth and a lot of like creepiness and a lot of twists and turns and interesting things. And so I think if you want to go to the next slide, we can
Yeah.
start talking about unraveling the mystery. So as we talked about earlier, Naomi Watts is a um an investigative journalism list. So that's why she brings the VHS tape to her ex, because he is some kind of expert in video and photography, that kind of stuff. Um, and so we follow her along as she looks at various different aspects in order to try and put pieces together to figure out where this tape came from, who these people are, who made the tape. And it's a fun journey to go on. And I think that's part of why this movie is so good.
Yeah, it has you know, because this is a physical thing, you know, she very simply goes, well, somebody had to have made this. Somebody knows where it's from. And she looks for clues. Um, Being that this is the early 2000s, we get a mix of researching, where she's going through like old newspapers that are bound together, a little bit of internet Googling, um, and she finds a lighthouse, and then she goes to the library and gets all the books on lighthouses to try to find it. And I can only imagine if they remade this movie today, they would just send it over to like a geoguesser person, and then they would tell you exactly where the lighthouse was in like 4 seconds.
Yeah, yeah. No, I thought that was particularly interesting too, because it's like, holy crap, you're getting a book with pictures of lighthouses in to try to pick out the picture of this lighthouse. Like that's a level that I'm thankful I've never had to experience, a level of research. Like, I mean, I've done a lot of like book reading and, stuff, but usually it's easier to find that stuff online than it is to, sift through a book to try to find a picture of the lighthouse you're looking for, because not all the lighthouses are going to be pictured in the book.
Yeah, it's it's lucky she finds all the clues that she does, but being that it's, you know, a local thing, I think she has the best shot. The
Yeah,
um the hoax or the curse hasn't spread as far.
right. And I also think that in talking about like research and stuff, that, this was the best time to make this movie and to set this movie, because I mean, probably by the time this movie came out, the internet would have been so ubiquitous in culture that you wouldn't be, going through stuff like that, or, going through the old newspapers like she did. And so I think that, that style of research is really located in that time period, and it's fun to like think about. I also thought it was interesting that she didn't look at any microfiche. She was only looking at, like, Clarice Starling was looking at microfiche, but this lady was looking at the actual newspapers and flipping through the like bound, you know, preservation copies of newspapers from years past.
Yeah, making photocopies.
Yeah, and photocopies, Xeroxing. I also noticed her Xeroxing wasn't very good. Like she cut off, some pages and stuff, which if you've ever done Xeroxing, especially in the early 2000s, it's super easy to do. But like if you want to read them later, you gotta pay attention to what you're copying. That's your tip from Secretary Caitlin there.
Well, if this was 20 years ago, maybe somebody would have found it useful.
Yeah, that's true. And I mean, I guess if you're missing every, 10th word on your journalism article, it doesn't matter. You can figure it out. But
So she does end up making copies of the titular video that's involved. And like we don't know all the VHS science.
No, we do not. We are Luddites. It's a magic box.
Honestly, it kind of is. I think it's magic. Like records, I understand.
Yeah.
DVDs, I understand, believe that one or not. Magnetic tape, no idea how that works. That's straight up wizardry.
Yeah, I don't know anything about it. And I mean, comment down below if the science of the VHS tape makes any sense in this movie because it may or may not. I really have no idea.
Yeah, because the one thing that made me skeptical was might have even been the scene that we see here. She goes to like a big like manipulation thing, and she tries to like expand what she's seeing on the film to like see the past the edges. And with like analog film, like 75 millimeter film, like you have an old timey like you're winding it up, that kind of thing. You could look past the edges. You wouldn't see anything, but like I guess you could, because it's something. But I don't know if that's how magnetic tape works.
Yeah, I have no idea. And the explanation given in the movie was very brief and not something that I could understand or took the time to research. So sorry, folks.
Yeah, it was the
It's not.
scientist man.
Yeah, yeah. I'm blaming Gary. That's his job.
Yeah, I
Make it
failed
happen.
you.
Yeah, but anyway, like the VHS tape, so she uses this like machine to try and like expand the visible spectrum of this film in order to see the lighthouse, and that sends her down this journey. The other fun thing that happens in this scene is she finds the fly on the screen comes to life, and then she gets a nosebleed.
Yeah, that was weird. Because nothing like that happens again or before.
But
Uh,
it does, Garrett.
it
It
does.
happens to her ex-boyfriend as well on day 2 or 3, whichever day this is in the day cycle to him. He sees the fly and he gets a nosebleed.
Oh,
Yeah. So that's one of the things that once you've seen this is a movie that holds up to repeat watching because there's so many little details that they sneak in that you just don't quite notice. And like one of the things is that on each of the days, before you die, because you have 7 days, something happens. And it's always the same thing. So like that is the biggest one that repeats is the fly.
and then there's the bruises that they get when the demon girl gets them.
Yeah. And
But
the ladder shows up for both of them. And I think the chair as well.
so so I have a question,
Okay.
and I guess this will be a spoiler, but this is 20-year old.
Yeah, and this is a review. So if you didn't want spoilers, you should have watched the movie.
So to live, you have to make a copy of the tape
Yeah.
and or show it to someone.
Yeah, that is vague.
So that is vague, but my question is she made the copy and then the next day she got like grabbed. But shouldn't the curse be over for her?
Um, no, I think that it still plays out the 7 days because Samara's evil and wants to torture you.
Okay. Now, I think it's only about making a copy or, well, shit. Because she never gives the copy to anyone. Her ex-boyfriend sees the original,
Right.
and her son sees the original.
Are you
Or,
sure he didn't see the copy?
no, no, the kid does see the copy because she throws that under the couch.
Right, yeah.
Okay.
Yes, so she shows the copy to the kid, you know, unbeknownst to her. Yeah,
But
so she has successfully shown the copy to somebody else.
now we get introduced later to Samara, who's the girl in the tape, who's the girl we've been talking about, to her dad, that's played by Brian Cox, who asks if she has the only video, and Naomi Watts says she made a copy, and Brian Cox kind of has like almost like no reaction to that, which makes me think he knows that like that's how she's safe.
Yeah. Yeah, and he says something like, "Oh, it's never going to end. You coming here proves that." Yeah. The other thing I just realized is that when she is at the boyfriend's or the ex-boyfriend's house, his like current girlfriend comes over, and so she takes the tape and like tries to leave. And he says, "Oh, well, I could show it to her because, she could look at it. She has experience in these things too." And she's like, "No, I don't want to. It's not safe." And he's like, "Oh, it was safe enough for me, like blah blah blah." Had had he shown the tape to the girl, maybe he would have lived.
Oh yeah, yeah, I think he would have done. Um,
But then she would have died. So I mean that would be good for Naomi Watts' character. I don't know. But then she would never have known, and then the kid would have died, so it would have been a mess. Yeah. I mean there are elements here.
so at the end, um, jumping forward a bit, because of this, Naomi thinks like it's all over because they eventually, discover the clues
Yeah.
and find the girl and bring like the body salvation.
Yeah. So what happens is Naomi Watts' character figures out that the mom of this adopted girl, Samara, she strangles her and throws her down a well and then closes the well so that, when you're looking up from the bottom of the well, you see a ring of light around where the new lid is on the well. So that's where the ring comes from, which is cool. Good idea. I like it. Um and so Naomi Watts' character falls into the well because Samara can manipulate both water and televisions to,
Yes.
knock her into the well. And so she finds the body and they bring her up to the surface and they're going to bury her. And Naomi Watts thinks that this, has solved all their problems.
Yeah, which makes sense.
Mhm.
Like if you've uncovered the mystery, you bring like justice, like that makes sense.
Yeah.
Like the spirit should be at rest.
And that's how a lot of these kinds of movies end, and I don't want to say like Lifetime movies or like, those kinds of like investigation kind of movies into a mystery. They end with a happy ending of like, oh, they found the girl, that she had been killed by her mother. That's terrible. Like woo 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 woo.
However, the child knows this is not going to stop the spirit of Samara.
Right. Yes, because Samara never sleeps. She is actually evil. And, that's how they got to this place to begin with.
Yeah, so
Her
because
mother
her
killed her for a reason.
because her ex-boyfriend didn't make a copy. At the end of the 7 days, he thinks, I'm in the clear. We saved the little girl. I'm gonna go back to doing whatever. And the film ends shortly after he gets killed, I guess is the best way to put it. Spooked.
Yeah, scared to death.
Yeah, I think the looks of like the deaths are really weird, but in like still a very scary way.
Yeah, they definitely scarred me for a long time. Both of them. Because you see the deceased corpses of several characters, and it's in flashes, like quick
Yeah.
flashes, and they stick with you, and that's such a great way to do it.
Yeah, I feel like if they would have held on it for much longer, they would have lost a lot of their like shock.
Yeah.
Um, so I wanted to bring this up. This is why I wanted to go to the end of the film. Naomi Watts finds her dead ex-boyfriend because her child says, this isn't over, and she's worried, because it would have been the 7 days, and she stumbles in and she finds the dead, scared guy, and then she just kind of leaves and doesn't stop his current girlfriend, um, Abby from NCIS. She doesn't stop her from like going and discovering the absolute horror.
Yeah, I actually thought that was a great scene. I'm guessing you don't like Naomi's decision there?
So I get it because she's like, if I tell her, then like this is something that's tying me to this murder, like to this mysterious death, and that's bad. But like also her niece and her ex-boyfriend have died within a week and a half of each other in mysterious circumstances. How the second movie is not like actual police investigating her is beyond me. Like, that's really concerning.
I don't know. I think that they did, diagnose them with natural causes, I think. I mean, the girl for sure.
Right, right. They said like, oh yeah, their heart stopped or
Right.
like exploded or
Listen,
whatever.
if they didn't do a police investigation for the four teenagers dying at the exact same time who all knew each other, they ain't gonna investigate this. This is
Okay.
just not.
Yeah, well, also the Seattle Police Department is pretty shit. So,
Yeah, yeah. Tracks. Well, so I actually I remember I watching that scene, I totally relate to Naomi Watts's character in that the way she stands that she sees the woman coming standing at the elevator waiting as she's coming down the stairs, and she just freezes and melts into the shadows and starts crying because she knows, well, she was already crying, but she knows what that lady is going to go see. And I think it's in one of those fight or flight moments, but this is a freeze. Like she freezes there. And, for her own emotional well being, she can't explain. Like that girl's going to go in there no matter what she says.
right, right.
Maybe we talk her into, walking down the street to get, a cupcake. That's not happening. Maybe a Starbucks because you're in Seattle. But yeah, I really liked the way they did that scene, and in the way that the staircase was. This is a very artsy film, and I really like how it was filmed. Especially compared to a lot of horror movies these days that just are not done in a artistic fashion.
It is a little bit too green for me. I think there's like it's just oversaturated with greens and blues.
Yeah, it's very cool toned. And I think that's one of the things that, when looking back and thinking about The Grudge and Dark Water and The Ring in this genre of Japanese American remakes, that is one of the key themes is this green coloring. And I like it. I think it's very artistic and yeah.
I mean, it's definitely sets itself apart from other things. I just think it's a bit too much. Um, it could have been turned down a little bit.
Yeah, a little. So, one of the things that I just realized upon watching this film this time that I've never realized before is that they plant the seeds for a reason and a way and a pathway for this crazy, demon possessed girl, whatever, to actually create the film. And they do that through these clues, are these x-rays. And these x-rays show up several times during the film. The first time I think is when the ex-boyfriend's looking through the medical file. He finds the the x-rays and he just kind of ignores them. I also think that Naomi Watts' character sees the x-rays in the house, the Brian Cox's character's house. And then they're on this tape of Samara at the mental institution. And the doctor is questioning her and he asks her, "How did you make these images?" And she won't tell him. She gives him very cryptic, evil child answers. But so in whatever way this girl is, a evil child, she has the ability to manipulate film somehow and to imprint images on the film. And I found this to be fascinating because in most horror movies, this is something that somebody would have said. This would have been
Yes.
a line of dialogue like, "Oh, she must have made the film with her brain," or something. Like, it would have been said very clearly. But in this movie, it's just tangentially alluded to in the smallest bit of dialogue and a few like visuals. And I think that that's a fantastic way to create mystery and suspense and also rewatchability in a horror movie.
Yeah, that's because I didn't really think too hard about how they made the tape, but this makes a lot of sense. And while you've told me this, I'm thinking about um Naomi Watts' child and about his drawings and how they are used to like communicate and see like his view, but they're very like literal. Like he's drawing these things, but he's drawing things that Samara is showing him.
Right. Yeah. So he sees very early on in the film, he draws a picture of his sister, or no, his cousin, buried underground. And the preschool teacher's like, what? She didn't die until like then. He's been drawing these for weeks. But he also like draws a picture of Samara's house and Samara and the ring and holes and things in order to give Naomi Watts's character more clues as to what the heck's going on, because she's not getting, visions or like being talked to by Samara, but it seems like the child is. And that's something that comes up in a lot of horror movies where kids are getting more information from um the ghosts and stuff than adults are.
Yeah, and in terms of creepy kids, these two are pretty creepy.
Yes, yes, yes. They are both very creepy. Samara is a very creepy child, and they do a lot of really cool things in order to make her seem even creepier. Um, Whereas Naomi Watts' son is much more of a father time, like very old soul child who, like that kind of a kid can get a lot of like like good praise from a parent for being easy to take care of and like does well in school and those kinds of things, but they're often, have a lot of issues, below the surface because they're being an adult before they need to be an adult.
So I looked into David Dorfman, who's
I did too.
so when he was 13, shortly after this movie was released, he was like 10 or so when this movie was made. When he was 13, he got admitted to UCLA, and 5 years later, he graduated a valedictorian and he went to Harvard Law School. He gave up acting and is an attorney.
Yeah, I thought that was a fascinating life because this kid is also like he's just got an iconic look to him, in the same way as the Home Alone kid, who I can't remember his name right now because
Macaulay Culkin.
I don't do names well. Yes, Macaulay Culkin. He has a very like distinguished look to him, which I think is something that is important with a lot of child actors. And I was interested to see what other stuff he was in, but this is all he ever was in was The Ring and The Ring too.
Yeah, and I mean that really puts it into perspective how like he's weird, but like his line delivery especially, like it's very creepy and off-putting, but I think part of that is just to be creepy and off-putting, to have a creepy and off-putting child in it. I
Uh-huh.
because that is like a hallmark of horror stuff is it's weird kids.
Well, and I also love the idea of the proceeds from The Ring paying for law school.
Oh yeah, because so we didn't talk about this, but this movie was hugely financially successful. It was made for less than $50 million and made $250 million. It's
Oh
one of
yeah.
it's one of the highest grossing horror films that there has been made. So I have no doubt that if they got their fair cut of it, the kid had a check for life.
Yeah. Yeah, good law school revenue. I mean, who knows, the way streaming is, but I mean, at least he put himself through law school, and hopefully that's something he actually wanted to do. I'm sure, given his personality and going to law school at like 20, he's probably a pretty neurodivergent fellow, and hopefully he's found a career that he really likes. And isn't being haunted by Samara, because a lot of child actors get haunted by, the films they were in.
Yeah, that's something I think about whenever I have rewatched Hill House or Bly Manor. Like there are just like little kids on there that are seeing things that like scare me as an adult. And I'm like, how on earth is this going to affect them?
That's true. I mean, on Blind Manor, like, hopefully, I think knowing that, like, the actors are actors, and I'm sure they tried to, make it more personable and be like, no, this is pretend, and that's, but like, I can't imagine watching it, like watching Blind Manor would freak me out.
Yeah, I have no idea. I'm sure that's something we'll hear about in 20 years.
Yeah, yeah, the trauma of being a part of Netflix TV shows. Yeah. Yeah, and we don't tend to watch a lot of things that involve kids, but the horror movies that do involve kids, I mean, think about, I wonder like how many you know, uh child actors who've been in The Exorcist and had to pretend to be possessed. Like, I wonder how messed up they are.
Yeah, who
But
knows?
the Poltergeist, I know everybody on the Poltergeist was cursed, so
Well, yeah, that was one of those like cursed productions.
yeah. Yeah. That's an interesting thing for us to kind of like dig into as we continue with Spookytober.
Yes, how cursed all these people actually are. Honestly, I think in some ways Naomi Watts is a bit cursed because they haven't gone on to do much of this high a caliber. They were in the King Kong Peter Jackson remake, which was a few years later. Um,
Oh, and that was not good.
as a kid, I liked it because of all the monsters and
I
stuff.
do remember you liking it now that I think about it, but you were alone in that. We all thought you were strange.
Look, I like monsters a lot. That's one of my favorite things about movie are creepy critters, and that movie was chock full of them.
Yeah, I'm looking through Naomi Watts's catalog, and I'm not seeing a lot of movies that I have seen. But she's been in a lot of movies. So, I mean volume over quantity maybe. But I mean a lot of these movies are also probably not movies that we would watch.
Yeah, that's fair. Um,
Yeah, I mean she's in like four or five movies a year, which is a lot of movies.
yeah, that is. I'm not saying she isn't working, but I'm saying that,
Yeah.
this was a very big role for her that you would think, in other ways, would catapult you. But, horror is weird like that. Like
It is. It can
it's
be a curse.
yeah, it can be very niche.
It can, and not everybody likes horror movies. It becomes very divisive, and like it's just not the same kind of it doesn't have the same kind of like large audience that, a romance or drama, or I mean even I mean fantasy and science fiction can have.
Yeah, well, I think horror movies, and this one hits that mark, can be very like visceral and like give you anxiety or scare you or shock you. Whereas like other movies, I don't think can have that same effect. Like other movies will make you feel different emotions just as strongly, but these aren't usually things like the human mind wants to have,
Hmm.
which is
Yeah.
which is one reason I think that people who really like horror movies really like them, because they're one of the few ways to like very safely feel like the adrenaline rush or like anxiety, or to be scared but in a safe way.
Yeah, yeah, and that's one of the things I enjoy about horror movies. I mean, I especially back then, I really enjoyed the scary movies that were coming out in the early 2000s. I think was a just a great time for scary movies. And I think when you're a teenager, like that kind of anxiety and that kind of like tension and suspense is so like you're looking for that. And I think it's just part of our nature to, be less risk averse, more adventurous when you're a teenager than you are when you're in your 30s and you're like, oh my God, is there a ghost over there? But at the same time, like ghost movies and a lot of other movies are not as entertaining when you become jaded.
Yeah, yeah, I definitely felt a bit of that watching this.
I was able to like put it aside and enjoy it, and thankfully I do wonder how much of that comes from like the goodwill that I have toward this movie from the that period of my life, because this
Yeah,
is probably like the first horror movie that I really liked,
I see.
because I think I saw Texas Chainsaw Massacre, the one in like 2002-ish. I saw that one in theaters and I did not like it because it is scary and bloody, and a guy chasing you with a chainsaw is not fun. Whereas trying to unravel this mystery as to why, what's happening here is very interesting, and it's creepy and it's scary and there's jump scares, but it's not something that's ever going to happen to me. Like watching a VHS tape is never going to kill me.
Yeah, this movie excels at creating that like suspenseful, dreary atmosphere that I definitely think a lot of other horror movies lack. That really gets under your skin a whole lot more than Rundown House in Texas.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a totally different vibe.
Do you have anything more to add before we
No,
get?
I think I'm ready to ask you, what did we learn?
So, I had to do some digging here. So initially, we wanted to know about these like chain letters and like messages and things, because I remember when I was a kid on like YouTube and on like the websites that I played games, in the comment sections were always like this, like this girl, she'll come to you in the mirror and rip your heart out, or like Bloody Mary or things like that if you don't repost this. um, I wanted to find a little bit on the origin of those, but that I couldn't find anything. There's probably a 4-hour video essay that explains it all. Uh, but I did some, more general research into like this idea of chain letters. Um, so the first recorded chain letter is attributed to 1888, and that was one of these like money schemes. So kind of like a pyramid scheme where it asks you to like send in $1, and then eventually you'll get a portion from everybody else sending in $1. So like if you get five people to send in $1 and then you give that $5 to, one of the persons, well, that person's $4 richer. And then if you just pass that around the group, eventually everybody just gets their money back. But that can be very quickly used to not give any money back to anybody and then just hoard all the wealth for yourself at the top, like a pyramid scheme. Um, these have been banned by the United States Postal Service. It's illegal. It's a form of money fraud. Um, and if it's electronic, it's a form of wire fraud, which is worse. But in general now, they're used as like emails for phishing scams to like nab gullible people. So like there was one that was allegedly done by the Red Cross or a like cancer institute, like to raise money for a girl who had cancer. And obviously the organization denied ever doing that. It was somebody, using that goodwill, but they were able to get money from people, get lists of people who were going to donate and who would share it to propagate scams later on. Uh, it's just something that's meant to like strike an emotional nerve. In this movie's case, it was to get you scared and worried and to get other people under the curse. For the rest of them, it's to try to get you to be generous or to pull on your heartstrings with a sick person. It's all manipulation. Just don't answer emails.
Yeah, I thought this was interesting because I hadn't really thought about this, back in the day in the moment, but growing up with the internet in the 90s and early 2000s, the if you don't forward this chain email, you're going to die situation was so prevalent. And, especially around teenagers where, they're gullible and they believe that. I mean, and they don't might not believe it, but it's like, oh, well, even if it's not true, I might as well do it because if it is, then that would be bad. And I just found that the whole culture of that to be interesting and like another little level on top of, what this movie is, that, you're gonna die in 7 days. And Samara, because she's evil, she doesn't tell you what you have to do to avoid dying in 7 days. And I like that.
Yeah, it's an interesting mythology that continues to ring true. Um, in season 2 of What We Do in the Shadows, there's an episode where the vampires are tasked with the curse of sending emails to people, which is really funny.
Yeah, that is a great take on the entire issue of the male demon and you know.
So I've also been playing a lot of Cyberpunk 2077, and you can read a lot of like terminals and emails and stuff, and one of them is one of these like send it around emails, which I think is funny, a nod from the people who grew up with the same sort of thing, that even in the far distant future, it's still going to be around.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah, the dumb chain email will persist as long as there are people to make them and people to send them.
So there was also the same thing, but with faxes, which I would think is more scary. Like,
Fax is it's no, it's more annoying. Like as a place that works with at a place that has a fax machine, and thankfully now our faxes go to our emails instead of like actually printing out a stupid fax. Like, imagine if you have a printer in your office that's constantly printing these things.
you're gonna die in 7 days. You're gonna die in 7 days. Just 100 of them. Everybody in the office.
Yeah, and I wonder like how often like the FBI had to be involved with these things. Like, and early on in these situations, like, who if you send one of those to like a police station or something, like, what kind of nonsense. I guess the good thing is you can always trace that fax number, back.
Right.
But
So
a little harder.
so there was some speculation that I was reading online that um because like back when snail mail was a lot more popular, people would be sending these things that through snail mail. And one of them was like, this is a German plot to derail our mail system. And I
Mm.
thought that was just funny because, like, yeah, I guess if you wanted to, that would be a good way to like overwhelm the system, is just to get a bunch of people sending all these letters to each other. But it's also kind of goofy and doesn't pass like a smell test to your average person.
Right,
But
because you're simultaneously, taking money from the people who are trying to sell these things because they have to buy the stamps and also funding the post office. Like honestly, we as citizens should create one of these scams where we just forward each other the same letters in order to keep the post office operating.
but that means I gotta go and buy stamps.
This is true, and that means you have to go to hell on earth, which is the post office.
I hate going to the post office.
It really is terrible.
There's always a line. There's always a smell, despite the fact that there's nothing there that should smell.
This is true. This is true. And usually post office buildings, I mean, they are not doing well generally. Like they got, leaky ceilings or something weird going on in them.
Well, I guess that's what we've learned. We gotta give the post office more money.
Yeah, send packages to places that aren't bombs. Do not send bombs. Send your mom a package of foodstuffs for a present. Random present. $10, you give it to the post office. Sending packages is way cheaper than you would think if you send them through the post office, but you have to go to the post office and it's really an unpleasant experience. But we need the post office and we need the post office to keep going and we need to keep it out of corporate hands because corporations like UPS and FedEx are not good for the keeping the post cheap.
This is true. They turn it into a for-profit venture.
Mhm. And they don't treat their unions very well. So go unions.
Well, the UPS, they in the past, I think 3 months, they renegotiated their contracts and they get paid quite a bit more now.
Well, that's good. They
But the
should.
rest of them, not so much.
Yeah. Got to keep it up. We buy a lot of dumb Amazon shit, so keep the UPS or USPS in business.
Oh, that reminds me, we didn't put this in the earlier slides, but Amazon, they're gonna start putting ads on the Amazon Prime things.
Oh no.
But you can pay $3 to remove it.
Oh my
Which
God.
which really makes me wonder if if $3 is the amount of money that they are generating from me from ads over a year of me watching their content, like how is it sustainable?
Yeah, they gotta look at this business model, take it a little more seriously. I also wonder what kind of ads they are because if they're ads for more things on Amazon, movies, trailers, I don't mind those. I'm happy about those. I want to consume more media and I want to know what's out there. But if they're ads for Tide detergent, I don't care. I don't want that. And this was actually in the beginning of streaming a long time ago, in the time before. One of the issues that I had with Hulu was they really didn't have that many ad sponsors. So if you watched one episode of a TV show, you could see the same ad 4 times.
Oh my God, I hate that. That's the worst part. Show me different things.
And I am more likely to turn the whole thing off. Like, I would rather have 10 ads that are different than the same ad repeated twice. The same ad repeated twice. I'm just turning it off. Forget it. It's done. I'm good.
Also, I really hate ads interrupting the show.
Yeah, I think ads really need to be put at, places that make sense in a TV show. And I mean, in the beginning's fine. Like Peacock has the ads in the beginning, and I finish, getting some foodstuffs together. I make
Unmute the TV, walk away, let the 2 minutes of ads play.
yeah, yeah. So, I mean, yeah, I think that the other issue is that, with Amazon Prime is that, because it's Amazon, it's hard to share accounts. And so, family wise for our households, we pay a lot of money to Amazon Prime. So what's $3 more a month? That's actually a lot a year. That's $36 a year.
Yeah, I don't know if that's per month or per year, but I know it's going to cost it. But
It's
like,
probably, yeah, it's probably per month because the Hulu to Hulu without ads is about $3, I think.
but you usually buy the Prime subscription in large chunks.
Yeah.
So there'll probably be some deal there. But I'll be honest, I haven't bought anything with Amazon Prime for this year, and I feel like if I don't at all, then I've wasted a shitload of money.
Well, that's true, but I mean, you've watched plenty of Amazon Prime content.
This is true. And I gotta be watching next year for Clarkson Farm season 3.
Yeah. Clarkson Farm season 3, Lord of the Rings, more Lord of the Rings.
I did not finish the first season of Lord of the Rings.
Oh my God, Garrett.
I was not gripped.
Oh dear. Well, on that bombshell,
Um, we want to thank you all for watching. And if you don't share this YouTube podcast to 3 of your friends, you may or may not die in 7 days.
indeed.
And do you see what I did there? I took the concept in the movie and put it to our media.
Garrett, you don't have to tell us how the sandwich is made. I think we all knew.
Okay. I wanted to remind everybody what we talked about today. We got political at the end.
Okie dokes. Good night, everyone.